Hi, my name's Claire. This is the draft of my video and I'll be looking at assassinations today. So, it's pretty safe to say that the majority of people in the Western world are aware of the assassination of JFK in 1963 and the countless conspiracy theories regarding his death. However, the assassination of his younger brother, Bobby F. Kennedy, is perhaps not as prominent in the public mind. My immediate item will be the film Bobby. A few months ago I happened to borrow this movie from the video shop, pretty much because I was just getting into American politics because I'd been watching The West Wing a lot, and was impressed by the number of A-list celebrities in the film. While I have since learnt that the 2006 film, written and directed by Emilio Estevez, has been largely panned by critics and wasn't really a commercial success, what struck me about it was that the film concentrated on a significant aspect of the assassination that can often be overlooked in the midst of the larger political consequences of the event. Before I tell you what it is, I'll show you the trailer to give you a bit more of a feel for the movie. So the film takes place in the hotel where Robert F. Kennedy was shot on June the 5th in 1968 at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He was shot just after midnight by Palestinian Sirhan Sirhan, who held strong anti-Zionist beliefs, having just delivered a brief victory speech following his win in the California presidential primary. The film follows the personal stories of 22 fictional individuals who were directly impacted by the assassination, which took place in the kitchens of the Ambassador Hotel. So the scene that most impacted me while I was first watching the film was the final scene where he was shot. The close-up of people's horror, shock and distress at Bobby Kennedy being gunned down right in front of them is pretty hard to swallow. In the actual assassination, 5 people were also wounded: a woman, a teenager, a reporter, an ABC director and a union leader. They all survived, but in reality who's to know just how much this event continued to affect them for the rest of their lives. So, which leads me to my point. I wanted to discuss the social impact of assassinations, the impact it can have on ordinary citizens, either directly or as dramatised in the film Bobby, or on a more mass public scale. As a side note, there's heaps of information concerning the assassination of JFK and the kinds of emotional impacts it had, as opposed to Bobby Kennedy, who was still only a presidential candidate at the time of his death. However, seeing they're both brothers, and they both have a massive historical, political impact on society, I'm at times using information and statistics that arise from both events. So, for my first source, I found a report from the Public Opinion Quarterly in 2000 entitled Trends, Assassinations by Sheldon Appleton. Appleton examines the effects of various assassinations on the American people through surveys and polls conducted. He states that close to 100 attempts have been made on the lives of US public officials in the 20th century alone. It's evident that the death of a high-ranking government official can have a profound effect on the lives of ordinary citizens. As Appleton asserts, memories of assassinations are indelibly inscribed in the psyches of many Americans. In surveys taken from 20 to 35 years after the event itself, close to 90% of Americans surveyed professed to remember exactly where they were when they first learned that President Kennedy had been assassinated. The same statistic also applies to those old enough who, after 24 years, remembered watching Bobby Kennedy's assassination on TV. Immediately following the assassination of JFK, the National Opinion Research Center took a poll which concluded that between 43 and 68% of respondents felt, quote, very nervous and tense, and sort of dazed and numb, and reported crying, difficulty sleeping, and loss of appetite. In studies undertaken in the 20 or so years after Bobby Kennedy's death, Appleton also comments that less than 40% of respondents were willing to accept that the assassination was the work of one man, Sirhan Sirhan. One idea that came to mind as I was reading this section of the article is that perhaps the multitude of conspiracy theories, which more often than not involve US government agencies, stem from the emotional and raw responses which come from ordinary citizens as a sort of coping mechanism, a struggle in which they try and locate the blame and responsibility of the murder as part of the grieving process in such a shocking, high-profile attack on the American consciousness. Of course, that's just a very abstract theory that came to mind, and I won't be attempting to prove that in any way. It's just something I thought could think about. Now, the second article I wanted to talk to you about is by Murray Edelman and Rita James Simon from the Ethics Journal. I chose this one because it was actually written in 1969, less than a year after Bobby Kennedy's assassination, and thought it might have some interesting and relevant insights. And it's also entitled Presidential Assassinations, Their Meaning and Impact on Society, which is pretty spot on. So, to begin with, Edelman and Simon address how political assassinations differ from other murders, in both its motivation and consequences. After every assassination, there is obviously an intense outpouring of public emotion and shock, as seen in the Kennedy assassinations. However, this is seen as a typical response, not an exceptional one. They mention other presidential assassinations, such as McKinley and Lincoln, to affirm their point, in that each time the response from the public has been overwhelming. One of the strongest reasons why I think the public response and impact is so great when it comes to political assassinations is also mentioned. Quote, "What people find so intensely upsetting is not only the fact of assassination or the death of a well-known figure, but the death of an incumbent of the highest office of the state. His official position makes a chief executive a reassuring symbol against threats from potential enemies and a potentially hostile environment, regardless of whether one approves of his policies. His sudden death shocks because it removes that protection. The public aftermath of a presidential assassination can be so turbulent that the government is under a lot of pressure to assure the general public that they are stable and that the new president will continue to pursue his predecessor's goals. Lyndon Johnson's slogan after the Kennedy assassination was, 'Let us continue.'" So, just to finish with, I have some comments to share with you made by American journalism professor Richard Reeves that I found in a newspaper article about an ordinary citizen, Dr. Marvin Ursher, who was at the hotel at the time of Bobby's assassination and was the first one to reach Kennedy immediately following the gunshots. Kennedy's death followed Martin Luther King Jr.'s killing 2 months earlier and his older brother John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Combined, these 3 assassinations were a jolt to a young generation that until then had felt invincible. A lot of people at the time, particularly young people, thought the country was going through a fundamental change and there was great optimism. It sucked the heart out of a generation. I think a lot of people lost their will for change in politics after that. In short, there are a multitude of devastating effects and consequences which follow any political assassination. There are those who are immediately affected at the time of events, as well as ordinary citizens who face the loss of a powerful authority figure, which can spark fear and anxiety across the country. And of course, the ripple of impact also spreads worldwide. I managed to find the final scenes of the movie Bobby on YouTube, which I will leave you with. And that's all. Thanks for watching. And my references. The end.